Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie Olmstead. I'm here to talk today about service communications, and I would love for this to be a somewhat interactive session. I know we're at the end of the conference, and it's been a busy 4 days for most of us, and I've had the opportunity to actually connect with quite a few of you around service comms and talk about some of our challenges and issues around planned maintenance and upgrades and change management in general. But anyway, I would love feedback and kind of questions you might have as we go throughout the presentation. So we have a pretty small group. Feel free to make this content and presentation really work for what you need to get out of it. So let's tell you a little bit about myself. I've worked at Microsoft for about 15 years now, and I now am in a unique position. I'm one of the few folks that is actually on call at Microsoft. So we're kind of evolving as a service culture, and I am one of the few folks that actually am doing a 24/7 shift. We're figuring that out and rotating it, and so I want to bring a lot of the learnings that we've had over the last year as we've been kind of evolving as a service provider. And we'll share some of the insights we've had and how we're going to improve, and all the great lessons and things that we've learned along the journey. So with that, my team focuses on change management, technical product management around comms, the admin portal, the service health dashboard. A lot of these areas are right kind of in our area of expertise. So feel free to ask questions or provide feedback on any of those topics as we go through. I thought it would be important to start. Let's just talk a little bit about service continuity and uptime and the SLA and just talk a little bit about the reliability of the service, because we do have a great service and it's very reliable and stable. And so I want to share some of the details around that, as well as how we communicate around our service level agreements and what happens if that was to be abrogated or not met. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'd love to focus a bit about, over the last 2 years or so, what does Microsoft do to ensure that uptime is good and that we have a healthy service? So we'll talk a little bit about that from a design perspective, and then we'll move into what happens when I have an outage. I think a lot of us in the room, how many people are already on Office 365? How many people are thinking about moving to Office 365? Okay, so it's about half and half, which is great. I think once we get on the service, we find, now what? How do I manage it? What are the expectations? So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can be prepared if something does happen, or what to look for, and how to ensure that you can help communicate with your help desk, your organization, as needed. And then, of course, what is the service health dashboard? What are post-incident reports? Those are two key assets that we have around the service incident process. So we'll really dig in and make sure that you have a grasp of what that means. And then Microsoft's approach to change management communication. This is definitely a space where we are evolving as a service provider, and we've been putting a lot of due diligence, investments, efforts into more programmatic change management communication. So we know that IT pros, the control aspect, we want to provide you with enough control, information, notification, so that you can manage the system, manage your users effectively. And we realize that some of that control is now built into the service. So how do we give you and empower you to be the information provider and the communication provider back to your orgs? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Some of you have asked questions about the upgrade process, and we will cover that a little bit as well and talk about service alterations, especially what happens if down the road perhaps we're degrading or taking away or changing some part of the service. How would you find out about that? What would you need to do? And we'll talk about how that happens. And then probably my favorite part of the discussion will be, what's the roadmap in the future and the innovation that's happening? We spend a lot of effort and resources and time thinking about the innovation in the future for service communications, because we realize it's so critical to the success of not only you, but to your companies and the service itself. So I think that's going to be a fun topic. So let's jump in, and I just quickly want to cover service continuity. What does service continuity mean? It's really our approach to ensuring that we have a healthy service, and we do that through a variety of measures. And really, one way that we think about and measure our service continuity is through the uptime. So I wanted to make that linkage. And then also, service continuity to me is a lot about reliability, recovery time objectives, and those types of concepts. And so we think very seriously about service continuity and making sure that we have the healthy service. When you think about uptime, what does that mean to my organization? This is a real easy way to kind of think about uptime. It's a simple formula here, and you can take user minutes minus downtime and run through this. And then if you think about the criteria that kind of impact an outage, a longer running outage is obviously going to have a greater impact on those numbers. And then outages that have more, the scope is higher or the scope is increased is obviously also going to have a greater impact. And again, I didn't want to cover this in too much detail, but I did want to just let you know we think very seriously about the SLA and the uptime, and then so much so that it's financially backed. And so this is how you can think about credits. If we were to fall below 99.9, it's a 25% credit of your monthly invoice of that service or that workload, and then you can see the cascading service there as well. So I do want to just impart confidence, and let you know that the service as a whole over the last year has been very, very healthy, and we've been meeting our SLA numbers, above the 3 nines there. However, we did have one service incident in November, and there was actually 2 incidents that kind of became a compounded incident. One was on November 8th, and one was on November 13th. And so we didn't meet our SLA for that month for a majority of North American exchange users. And so from a transparency perspective, our vice president did a blog. That event was such a major outage for us that Rajesh decided to talk about it publicly and what we were going to do, and we made a lot of these service credit, this information available. So that was one blip, that we've had in the service history. But overall, for the most part, over the year, we've seen above the 3 nines. Sure. Question. Great.
So when you talk about the SLA and downtime,
Yes.
Is degradation of service, so I'm not getting any
Yes.
inbound or some outbound, that part of the SLA?
No. So the SLA, you can find the SLA, the factual terms and conditions online. The SLA basically is, for example, Exchange. It's the inability to receive email. So, and especially if you think about it's through OA. So so you have many different ways you could receive email, but if it's the access is totally cut off, then that's considered the SLA breach. So the degradation or a slowed performance usually isn't part of an SLA abrogation. But I'd encourage you to take a look at that SLA online and really dig in, and understand for each workload, there's different criterias and different levels of what that means. And then, of course, you can always provide feedback. We will be reviewing that on a yearly, annual basis and updating that. From a service credit perspective, right now, it's reactive. So we ask that if you think that you've been impacted and your SLA has been abrogated, we ask you to open an SR request, a support request, and basically have that processed, and engineering would take a look at that, go through the logs, and do the validation with that formula that we looked at with user minutes and downtime. So in the future, we are looking to more proactive credits and really understanding at a tenant-by-tenant level whether or not the service was impacted. But right now, it is that reactive credit process. So if we think about service continuity by design, I love this view. It's like a 40,000-foot view of how we've designed the service and how we think about maintaining a healthy service from the get-go and from the start. And so these concepts are really important as we think about the operations and the engineering life cycle. So we'll cover a little bit of these, but think about redundancy, human backup, of course, all the monitoring and inspectability, predictability, and then just the way that the workloads are distributed and federated really allows for isolated impact or isolated potential failures to happen. So I want to dig into a few of these because I think when we think about redundancy, I think this is a particularly important area. The way Microsoft's designed our physical redundancy is if you think about data centers, for example. We have at least 2 data centers per region, and the data is always backed up in multiple data centers. So you're always, perhaps it's the East Coast and the Midwest. So if there was a potential hurricane or some kind of weather disaster, we could move people from we could fail them over from one data center to another with a seamless service. So you might see a small, a couple of minutes of downtime or outage, but then the service would be back up and running very quickly. We also think about that from a kind of a network and a hardware redundancy perspective, and having multiple points of hardware there, so that basically we can always fail over, or having standardized components, so we can always swap in things very easily if there is a problem. One of the key benefits of the Office 365 service is the offline capability. And so I often remind people about this when we're thinking about, for example, if you're off, so you can work anywhere. You could work at your son's soccer game, and then when you get back online, Outlook syncs and sends the mail. The same with Lync. We have a Lync client, so you can be working offline and doing that as well. And then of course Office. So most of our workloads have a rich client, so you can be working offline even if the service isn't available. And then resiliency. I think especially with Exchange, this is one of, Exchange has been architected so that we're constantly load balancing and moving users around the network. And this provides, not only it's a best practice, but it also provides challenges. As you can imagine, as we're trying to understand and report where a certain tenant or a certain user is, some of these, the ability that we're moving them and restructuring them around provides it difficult to actually locate and provide some information about a certain user at times. But we are evolving and getting better at this tenant by tenant level reporting. So right now we're at a kind of an infrastructure and a regional perspective, and we're moving to more granularity and becoming able to report out on specific tenants. So that's exciting. We mentioned the distributed workloads. I just think it's a key, thing to consider, that most of what we see when we have outages or incidents, it's impacting only one workload. So it's SharePoint specific, it's Lync specific, but your whole Office 365 service is not impacted. And that's kind of a typical situation. We have seen network outages, and that would impact then the whole service. But that's been a very rare case, and typically in those types of things, we're able to bring the service back up within a half an hour or an hour, just depending on the circumstances. If you think about evolution from a Microsoft perspective, the human backup is one of our strengths. Of course, humans can always add an element of unpredictability, but we think that at Microsoft, having humans involved in this process is one of our strengths. And I'd love to just share from behind, thinking about all the things that have happened over the last year. One of the key things that we've done differently is the software engineers that build and write and code the system are now actually also on call with me. So we are all on call. The ability there for someone that wrote the system and did the coding to then have to manage and operate, and if something's wrong, be the one to implement the fix, has been a tremendous efficiency. It's also made people more accountable. Now we're all invested in that. And so from a customer perspective, I think that's really reassuring. We're all kind of looking at it from the entire life cycle of the service, not just throwing it over the wall and having someone else manage it. And then we also do have dedicated support teams, account teams. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the different roles from a support infrastructure. And then one of the other changes that's happened is dedicated communication managers. So we've done this shift from having about 100 different people that are involved in the incident management process and communicating to the service health dashboard. And now it's a group of about 10 to 12 people. And so they're really good at it, and they do it all the time. So we work on consistency, we work on tone, we work on details and being more specific. So we have a great opportunity to run with this team and really be thinking about metrics. The executive team looks and goals them on how quickly they're posting to the service health dashboard. And we have certain goals around posting within 15 minutes. And so we're continuously looking at that and monitoring it. And there's a lot of pressure to meet those goals. So from a customer perspective, we are trying to have the due diligence around being better and more programmatic in that space. Okay, so we're going to move into a little bit more about service communications now and really dig into 4 kind of key areas. But I like this slide. It's kind of a mock data center, and I think here's Jenny. She's looking at, we're about to change something in the data center, and even though it's a fake data center, we're going to go ahead and notify everybody now. But so this is kind of how Microsoft thinks about service communications. Service incidents. We talk about service interrupting events, degradation, slower performance, planned maintenance. And with planned maintenance, Microsoft's been doing a better job about posting to the service health dashboard. I'll show you a couple of examples of planned maintenance and how we think about that, but a lot of due diligence. And then honestly, in the future, maintenance should be seamless. You shouldn't have to worry about whether something's an impacting event or not, because the service is always evolving. And for you to be on the latest and greatest means that we have to be always upgrading and doing this maintenance behind the scenes. And then service alteration. So how do we think about when we have cool new features, enhancements that you want to be able to take advantage of? How are you going to find out about those? We'll talk a little bit about that, as well as the more disruptive changes. And those are some of the things that my team is thinking about in terms of, is it a change to an admin? Is it a change to a user? And we realize that if it's a change if it's something that an admin has to do and take action on, it's probably a little easier for you to maintain and manage. But if you have to start to roll out something to your users, provide training, those things we understand take a longer lead time, and we need to give you more time. So we'll talk about a 12-month cadence and a 1-month cadence of updates. Anything that's admin impacting, and it's considered a disruptive change. So if you don't take action, your system will break. We're going to give you a year, 12 months to do that. Now, moving forward, we'll talk a little bit about the upgrade cycles and things like that and how that might impact that 12-month cycle. But that's the commitment. And then a month, for notifications around other less disruptive changes. So a 30-day notification is kind of an industry standard, and that's what we're adhering to as well. And then, one of kind of the less thought about ways that we communicate, but I think it's important to talk about it, account lifecycle. So these are our subscription mails. That tells you about the health of your account. So we're going to let you know, hey, your service has been activated, your credit card is having issues. I just had one from Netflix that, I got one of these in my personal email where it said you need to update your credit card account. And so I always find it kind of fun to read those types of mails now and just see from a relationship marketing perspective how other companies are messaging that. But, what I noticed was I don't pay attention to a lot of my Netflix mails, but that one I did because it's relevant to me in keeping my service running. And so you can kind of think about that in relation to, Office 365. There's going to be some promotional emails, but then there's also going to be these transactional mails that you'll be able to tell the difference. They're much more kind of notification, and they're very kind of clear about this is what's happening, and this is the time. And so it kind of gives you just the information you need when you need it. Okay, so this is the service incident communication is where I kind of live. A lot of my daily time is spent thinking about how do we manage these vehicles. And what I would love to just have you walk away from the session with is understanding Service Health Dashboard is going to be our key. It's always going to be the first and best content. The Service Health Dashboard is located within the admin portal. And this is one of the ways that you can see workload by workload. Is it degraded? Is performance fine? Is it healthy? What's the status there? You can also see planned maintenance there. So there's a lot of information within your Service Health Dashboard. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but we do have a really exciting mobile phone app that's available now for Service Health Dashboard. We just released the beta in June, so we're really excited about that. And you can imagine the Service Health Dashboard being available on other modalities in the upcoming future. So the Service Health Dashboard is specific to you. So what's great is it's an authenticated view. So if you think about the service health dashboard, it recognizes the infrastructure that you're on, so it knows the exchange and the exchange forest, but it also then knows the region. So it might say APAC, or it's just looking at APAC exchange server 10, for example. But so it knows that you're on that infrastructure, and then it maps and shows you the health of that. In the future, as we've been talking about, you're going to get much more granularity in this view. So you'll be able to see even, you can imagine, 10% of my users are down. So we'll be able to give you that full view of exactly your service and kind of the level of what's happening there. The admin RSS feed is it's not new, but it's kind of a new thing for a lot of people. They're not aware of it. You can sign up for this RSS feed, but what I'd kind of caution you about is this is not as specific as the Service Health Dashboard. So this is really at a regional level. It has no idea what infrastructure you're on. But it does kind of help cross-check. If you have people saying, is there an issue, and maybe you're not showing it on your dashboard, sometimes the RSS feed is a great way to validate that. And you can say, well, gosh, there is an issue in EMEA or Europe. Maybe I am impacted, and it's just not showing on the Service Health Dashboard. Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, is the dashboard going to get more tenant specific?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so
It's not today.
right, so the dashboard is becoming more and more tenant specific. The granularity, when I mentioned the resiliency and thinking about exchange and the load balancing we do, that's part of our challenge with tenant level reporting, is we're always moving people around, so it's hard to really pinpoint and provide a status on their health. But we've gotten better. We've gotten a lot of insights in the space and a lot of investments, and customers are asking for it. Quite frankly, this is probably one of our number one ask. I will share, this is really, really exciting. We just got for the field, our internal teams, the ability to look up a tenant level. So if you have a TAM or a CDE, they have a tool now called Iridius, and Iridius has a customer domain lookup. So this helps our support teams, this helps our account teams. We know that it's frustrating, it's not available to you yet as a customer, but I did want to mention it as this is a first step. We did it internally, we can do it, so we can, it's coming. We'll be able to have that ability that you can do that soon too.
Iridius?
It's called Iridius, yes.
TAM has access to it.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is hot off the presses. I think that released May 29th or June 1st. So that's a really exciting step in this journey. And then the post-incident report or review, this is one of Microsoft's differentiators. A lot of companies, service providers, don't do a post-incident report, but we think it's important to do the due diligence. And this is, quite frankly, how we learn. We take these very seriously. Every incident, I assure you, goes through a process of a post-mortem, and we look at the root cause analysis, and then we action that. Not only do we do that, but there's a review with the leadership team, and so all of these incidents have quite a bit of monitoring improvements happen because of them. We fix the process. So as painful as an incident might be, please be reassured that we are learning and continuously improving based on every incident that happens. Now, a post-incident report, we'll talk a little bit more about those, but they are available when an incident impacts more than one customer. So those are things that we do quite regularly. The additional channels, these are just things I wanted to make sure you were aware of. The community, the forums that Microsoft has around Office 365 are fantastic. In terms of, and I think we're all just evolving to use forums for finding the information that we need. For example, I was just out on a Nokia forum the other day, and I found exactly what I needed. I didn't have to call the help desk, and I didn't have to, so it's a great self-service tool. We are investing a lot with our community V teams to make sure that the information can be found here. For example, we had an issue recently with some of the upgrades and an auto-discover feature. We made sure to plug that into the community, made it one of the top posts, did some stickies so that people knew about it, and just tried to drive traffic there so people could find the guidance very quickly. We talked a little bit about the blog. It's one of our big, broad megaphone channels. It's typically used for marketing, as Twitter is as well. So Twitter right now is kind of a marketing vehicle for us. In the future, you can imagine that there may be a separate handle or a separate Twitter space for service management. That's something that we're investigating and looking into. We think it might be an exciting place to communicate. And I would love feedback if you have ideas of other places you'd like to see, other channels you'd like to see, or other ideas. Please let us know. Yeah.
On the Twitter side of things,
Yes.
we used it obviously when there was an outage earlier this year. We directed tweets to that. Never got a response back, and there was never anything updated on the Twitter page. So it just seemed like it was like a black hole.
Yes, that's.
Coming to that.
Yes, so there's a lot of work being done with Twitter. And just to be very candid, I think it was more of a marketing vehicle, and we started to see the community driving things to here, but it's very mixed. We see a lot of Latin America folks use it, so we're still just trying to get our hands around how to use Twitter effectively, but there are some things happening in the next probably August, September, October, in the short term, around Twitter that we're looking at making that more effective. But please understand that we try and direct message folks via Twitter. So we have a support team that's actively watching Twitter. The Iridius tool that I mentioned, I have the ability from my desktop to look at Twitter for Office 365, and then we can point support to people and help make sure they get managed and questions answered. So we're doing a much better job of that now than we did, say, 6 months ago. And then you'll see that continuously get better.
And I mean that in all seriousness.
Yes.
Then it would be a more of a privatized place. I'm sure you don't want to be told that we have an outage.
Yeah, and we honestly, Twitter, Yammer, we've really been looking at it. We're just trying to get our heads around since the acquisition. It's a really exciting, kind of fun communication tool. We've been mostly using it internally just to pilot and beta test some ideas. But I'll take that back as something that it could be interesting. I think we struggle with Yammer, Twitter. If you think about their more broad channels, and we'd love to be more targeted and just be able to communicate directly with you. So I think email, some of these other channels where we can be very specific, will probably also have more options. So email would be great. Good. Well, I was just going to say that. You took my joke. But that is one of the challenges we have. And we've heard a lot for text, SMS requests. I will tell you, we're having challenges with SMS. It's a hard problem to scale. Worldwide, we're having some issues. And then the scale that we would need, hundreds of millions of text, we have not found a provider or internal solution that could actually handle that volume in the quick time that we need to respond. So we are focusing more on mobile apps and those types of SHD or Service Health Dashboard experiences. Yes?
So, as part of this, if you had something provisioned on Azure, you can link it with a system center on site and get alerts.
Yes.
Why did you not do that with 365?
That's a good question. We'll probably see that happen in the future, much tighter integration with Azure. I think right now it's thought of as a separate service, but it'll most likely evolve to that.
Living on Azure.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and our Service Health Dashboard lives on Azure. Yeah, so thank you, good comment. So these are our primary channels, the additional channels, and this is kind of how we think about the service incident space. I did want to just show you from a Service Health Dashboard perspective, if you're new or thinking about Office 365, we have a variety of icons on the dashboard. This is, we're trying to provide you with kind of the real status. Has the service been restored? Is it a false positive? And these types of indicators. And then what actually happens, in an outage? So at the start of an incident, we think about, I'll tell you a little bit more about the account team in the next slide, but this is basically the process. And at the start of an incident, we have an incident manager and a comms manager that are engaged. So there's several resources, as well as some ops teams. And there's a time to post metric. We try and post within, it's either an automatic post from monitoring that happens, which has been, we've been working on improving that. But then it could also be we see the alerts or the logs, or we find the issue and we post within 15 minutes. But recently, we had a lot of folks calling in and saying, how come my Service Health Dashboard isn't showing? I've been impacted by an outage for maybe 4 hours. I had some feedback around that. So what's happening here is we've engaged in empowered support. If we start to see a high call volume or we start to see calls coming in, again, we monitor and we say there's an issue, we declare a service incident, and we bring in the right resources to manage it. So that's actually an improvement that's happened again over the last 6 months. We call it the big red button, and support can push the button and it engages all the resources. So again, continuous improvement there, but we do try and then post that we're investigating just to let you know. We think there might be an issue, we're working on it. Most times what I see is from investigating to the incident status posted, they find out enough information about the issue and the expertise is so good that they can then resolve the issue fairly quickly from that point. And then we do have certain cadences for updates, so about every hour, depending on the severity or the scope of the incident, and this would all be communicated in these alerts or notifications and telling you, hey, we've realized this is we'll give you an update in an hour, or this is a database problem, we know what the problem is, but it's going to take us a little bit longer to investigate, and so we're going to come back to you in 4 hours with an update. And that would probably be a lesser severity type case with that. And then, the post-incident review actually does get posted to the Service Health dashboard if you were impacted, so you could see that and have the ability to download that. If you haven't seen the SHD, here's a view of that. I just wanted to let everybody just experience it if you haven't. I did want to just mention, we do have an emergency broadcast system. The EBS, or the emergency broadcast system, would automatically be initiated, and it's HTTP Office 365 status, I think. Just check that. That's HTTP status.office365.com. So you could always go to that as a URL, and it would automatically give you the status. The SHD has a new 30-day view. So this was one of the requests that we made earlier in the year, I think the February timeframe. We used to only show about 7 days. So again, this was based on customer feedback saying, we'd like to just see a little bit more of the service history here. So that was an improvement. The other thing you can do is now you can click on these incidents, and you could actually see a pop-up comes up, and it shows you the closure summary. It shows you all the details around what happened there. Did you want me to go back? Or? Oh, sure. So for the EBS, it's http status.office365.com. So here's a view of the RSS. Again, we talked about its regional view, but these would come, right to your email, so that's pretty handy. Here's a look at what the community, if you haven't been out there, what that looks like. And then customer email. This, we mentioned it as it's kind of a funny scenario. If your exchange is down, it's not a great thing to get an email. But we are trying to, I would say, be one of the things that, from a customer satisfaction perspective, customers have said, we just want to be notified in the channels that we prefer. And so I think, what you'll see moving forward is some kind of option of how would you like to receive updates or information about your service. And email is something that we absolutely do today. We do it more, though, in the most kind of outrageous scenarios where we are explaining what happened. So, for example, the November outage that I mentioned, we sent an email. We explained the details, how to do the credit. Those types of things come in an email. I think you'll see more and more emails from us, though, as we start to be more programmatic. I think it's a good way to communicate and just let people know. But the interesting thing here, our open rates for these types of emails are only about 50%. So we wonder sometimes, we're sending things out, but we don't know if people are receiving it or opening it. So that's one of the challenges we have with email.
Is that something you have to sign up for? Because I've never received an email.
No. So right now it's a bit inconsistent, and we're looking to be more programmatic about if it's an outage, for example, thinking about thresholds. If it's an Exchange outage over 2 hours, we would send you an email. If it's a SharePoint outage impacting, so we're thinking about severity, duration, workload.
November one, so I've never received one of that.
Oh, and you should have probably. Yeah.
Right. But the comment as far as the email itself is down,
Yeah.
Every administrator should have an alternate email. You require
Yes, yes.
an administrator.
Yeah.
So
So this is a really interesting point. We get a lot of comments or questions around how do I know if I'm the right admin, or how do I know if I'm getting the notifications or I'm missing notifications? If you think about in your profile, it says My Profile, it's up in the upper right-hand corner. There's a contact preferences there, and there's a tenant admin. If you're trying to set the global admin privileges, we communicate with that, it's the preferred email address, and you'd see that there. There's also another email address that you can set in the information setting, and that's for an alternate email address. So if there's no preferred email address, we send to the alternate. Anyway, it's good to know that there's two different email addresses there. There's sometimes confusion about that, and I think, again, moving forward, we'll streamline a lot of that, make it all available in one spot, and so you have a little bit more visibility into that, and it's easier to read and understand. But then also, think about moving forward. Wouldn't it be great to have all of that in one comms panel or some kind of admin communication tasks place? So you're being communicated about what you need to do, have we done it, and then you would see all of that, in one space. So that's some of the thinking there.
quick question.
Yeah.
Any chance you could show us exactly preferred versus alternate where that's set?
Perhaps after I can, and I can send you that as a follow-up too. I know it's an interesting thing. It's an important detail that makes a big difference in receiving those comms. So we talked about Twitter. I did want to just explain the way that the account team is set up. So we talked about the comms managers. We talked about incident managers. The communication managers are that dedicated group, about 12 people in Microsoft, that they focus on this on a day-to-day basis. So we're really seeing the communications quality improving, and these are folks that are gold and targeted on that. The incident managers, the folks I mentioned, they're devs, engineering, and they actually support and do operations of the incidents. So that's a good thing. We also have support and then account management. So I've heard some folks talk about Cloud Vantage, TAMs. There's kind of a higher managed account level of support that you can also have with your Office 365 service. So PERS, what's available in a post-incident report? These are basically published within 5 business days. So we do a pretty good job of a closure summary of an incident when we close the incident or it's considered resolved. At least I think it's a pretty good amount of detail, for what happened during the incident. And then the post-incident report is available within 5 days to say, hey, we've done the root cause, we've done the postmortem, and this is what we found. And not only that, but this is what we're going to do as next steps. So that's a real commitment. And then in those executive monthly service reviews that we perform, we actually look at all of the next steps and we make sure we're tracking and those things are actually happening. And a lot of our improvements, are happening from these next steps. And I like the fact that it's very specific. This report shows you this next step, and hopefully that helps with confidence. Yes?
PIRs used to come in the form of an email. Now they're just posted to the health service board. And if we're not tracking that, how long do those stay out there before they fall off? Because I know like the
Yep.
November outage, a reference was, hey, it was on the dashboard. We weren't notified that the PR was actually published for us to go print it
Sure.
and take it to leadership and explain why we had the outage.
Those are also available 30-day view. But you can always request a post-incident report.
And we used to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
that used to be part of the process, but they just said, hey, see your health dashboard. That doesn't really tell you when it's going to be posted. And if you happen to miss that window, then we're stuck with open communication.
Yes. Okay. So maybe some kind of feature or some kind of interactive button, request a per, or
Well,
some.
dashboards are moving to a tenant specific.
Yeah.
That would be
Okay, that'll help.
maybe it would provide PIRs long with 30 days.
So it sounds like there is a need for a little bit longer time to have some of this information too. Okay. Here's where you can find, again, we talked about they're available within the Service Health Dashboard. In the document download, believe it or not, this was an enhancement recently. So this is really improving kind of real time Now you can actually download those documents and have them handy. I also just wanted to give a quick call out to, we do take this very seriously. We just added a per survey so that we want to hear, we want to understand, is this kind of cutting the mustard? Is this enough information? Is this reassuring? What are you using this information for? And by having that, we can then provide better details in the PERS. So I would encourage you, if you do have a post-incident report, use the survey. We're going to be actively kind of making improvements on that, and that again just launched. So that was kind of a new enhancement. And so continuous learning, I've talked quite a bit about this, but it's really the PERS, these monthly service reviews, and then improvement just from that. So it's this continuous cycle that we're running through. But these actions are taken very seriously. And I think that's one of the fun things with the service. You can actually see these enhancements happening more real time. You don't have to wait for a ship cycle or a big release. They're happening every day. Here's what planned maintenance might look like, if you would see that in your service health dashboard. We do have a commitment to let you know about maintenance 5 days in advance. But again, we're trying to make maintenance not be customer impacting. And if it is customer impacting, we would let you know about it, and also try and manage that or do that maintenance in off hours, low peak hours. But the way the engineers have been working with the system, they've gotten so that they can kind of finesse this enough that it shouldn't impact customers at all. And so I think transparent hygiene of the service is what we're moving toward, and that's kind of a goal of ours with this. Okay, let's talk about service alteration. So we're going to kind of move out of the service incident types of communication, and we're going to talk about changes and service alterations. And one of the key things that we've done is a service alteration. Again, change management. You can think about there's small changes, there's kind of medium changes that might have kind of short term, and then there's more disruptive changes. So if you think about an admin task newsletter, what we do here is we look at your system and your requirements and the upcoming, perhaps like for the upgrade. We've done dynamically generated content to administrators to say, these are the areas that we think you should be watching for. Here's some guidance for these things, and it's all tailored. So you might have a laundry list of things we're watching or known issues, and these newsletters do a pretty good job of tailoring and giving you just the things that you need. This goes in conjunction with what we call the admin upgrade center, or the task center. But this is a place where you can then go online and find all this same kind of FAQ, the guidance. It's all in one spot. And so the newsletter always links to this, and it's all up to date. So this is kind of a great resource for change management. When you think about, I think about change and service alterations. It could be, recently we did a login UI change. We went ahead and sent an email. Hopefully you got an email on that. We sent an email to all the users about that, or all the admins about that. And basically, the thought there was, hey, nothing's really changing, or you don't have to do anything necessarily, but we think your users are going to notice it, and you might want to give them a heads up. It had a more visual UI and a nice kind of login screen. We also thought there may be a potential perception of security risk. If suddenly you walk in one day and you have a new login screen and you weren't expecting it. So we decided to communicate on that. There was no real action, but it was just more of an awareness. And then moving forward, you'll be able to have the ability to customize that login screen, or think about customizing that or co-branding it. And, so those would be the types of communications that we would send and say, hey, you might want to do this action to get to this state. We've also thinking about service alterations. Recently Live Meeting was retired or is being retired. And so we looked at the group of users that were on that. We sent them emails, we did call downs. So, we really think about if we're removing or taking away something from the service, how do we make sure you're aware about it? No surprises, right? Nobody wants surprises. So that's the idea here, is to just let you know about it. And it may not be an optimal state, but we're going to at least let you know about it, and then what you can do to mitigate it or to get through it. And in this case, like Link was available, so that became an alternative option there. Okay, upgrades. I know there was some questions around moving to 15 if you're on 14. And so I think it's important. You probably have gotten a lot of this from the conference. We're moving to these, more often upgrades, sorry, not upgrades, but more often releases. And so it's really going to be seamless. We're thinking about it from a perspective of how do we group things by, aggregate features that make sense from a value perspective and provide certain high value or high scenario-driven things at certain times. But then there's also going to be kind of these minor upgrades that are always happening, and then things that are more disruptive with that 12-month cycle that I mentioned. So you can think about, we'll always be releasing things, maybe on a daily basis. If there's a service pack or a hot fix, we're going to get that out as quickly as possible. If there's something that takes a little bit longer lead time, we're going to get that out on probably a monthly cadence, and then you might even have some year cadence, longer term. And then you can think about, like, from 15 on, 14 to 15 was a pretty major upgrade in terms of the amount of work an administrator has to do. The idea is moving forward, those major upgrades go away. Once we get on to 15, it's more seamless, and hopefully we won't have what we consider these big upgrade moments. It'll just be more seamless to the service. We did recently have a new system requirements policy around the upgrade, and I think this is one of the things that's catching some people off guard, is we are not up to date on kind of our base requirements, and so then we're finding problems in the service, or the service doesn't work how it should, or it's not as optimized as it could be. And so for the best experience, I just wanted to mention for the web, the client, and the operating system, these are also published online, but it's really important to kind of be on the latest and greatest so that you can have the latest of the service. If you have kind of the base, so for example, Windows XP. Windows XP, I think next April, is going to be going away from a systems requirement perspective. I know a lot of people are on XP, but we want to get you onto Windows 7 so you have a better experience. We think XP is, 10 years old now, or, so when we did XP, or when that was created, there weren't some of these cloud concepts and some of these ideas. So getting you onto Windows 7 and even Windows 8 would help down the road. But so these would be the types of things that would be notified or communicated to you that, hey, you're still running Windows XP. We want to get the train moving off of that. And then with the clients, again, here, think about it as not recommended, recommended, and best experience. You're going to have kind of a performance or the way that your system works. It would still work, with some of these Office clients, but with Pro Plus, it's going to be the best experience. And you might have certain features that you can use, or that are enhancements that aren't available in some of the other scenarios. The other thing I want to mention is IE8. IE8 is kind of the base browser requirement right now, and so we were seeing some concern or some issues around IE7. And when the engineering teams did some analysis and some looks, at kind of how many people are using IE7, and even in some of the larger organizations where there was a concern, we found that less than 2% of users were actually using IE7, and the thought of those 2% was that they were probably logging in from home. So I'm not sure if that resonates or if that's kind of what you're seeing as well, but we're now just focused on IE8 and kind of IE9 and 10, but so it's always trying to just make you aware of what that is so that you can have the best experience possible. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about future direction. We talked a lot about, details, more programmatic, being more diligent about the cadence and kind of consistency. And I think, as kind of fluffy as that may sound, that's the real rigor, right? And that's the real process improvement of, we're going to do this every time. We're going to send the emails every incident for this type of category of incident. And so we're really working hard and investing a lot here. So this is something that you can expect from us moving forward, is to just be very, very consistent and very programmatic here. The thing I'm probably most excited about is in product. We spend a lot of time thinking about, gosh, if people aren't opening the emails, if people, all these varieties of channels, but what if it was right there in the product? So if you're a user and you're in Outlook, what if in the nav bar it says, hey, this feature, OA is not working, or calendar may have intermittent access, or we think that that's, where we're going to have the most traction or the most uptake, or people would consume the message quickest, fastest. And that's what it's all about, is delivering the right message to the right audience in the right place. So the in-product notifications, I think, are going to be key. But then also think about like a comms panel concept. Some way that we're going to be able to aggregate all of these changes that are specific to your tenant, provide them in one view, and then you would know, like, did I action this or did I not? Right now there's no way to really keep track of a lot of that information. So that's another thing that, from an in-product perspective, is happening. And then we think about just planned maintenance, as I mentioned, being smarter about how we're doing the maintenance, having it be less impactful to you, the way that we move and kind of think about the users on the service. So this should, the way that Rajesh, our VP, talks about this kind of goes away and becomes a non-issue because we have to always maintain the service. So we're going to always be working on it, and we just want it to be totally seamless for the users. So we talked a little bit about tenant-level reporting. This is our goal, obviously, to get there. I did want to mention that we've had another breakthrough in this space. Recently, that auto-discover issue I mentioned with some of the upgrades, we were able to curb, we had a lot of people calling into support, and so manually, we were able to pull the tenants that were impacted and post that to those service health dashboards. So it was kind of one of the first steps to tenant-level reporting, and then that would be updated on a rolling basis, depending on the upgrades. So if we think you don't have your auto-discover settings set properly, you would see that on your service health dashboard. So that's a big win. That's being able to really prescriptively say, this tenant, this is your guidance, and here it is on the dashboard. So that little breakthrough was actually was pretty key and critical in this journey. Okay, and then the dashboard program. So I don't have any slides on this, but I do have my phone, and after the session we can look at, I have a mobile app for the service health dashboard. It's available, we just had the beta in June, so that'll be publicly available very soon, probably within the next month or so. And that service health dashboard, what the benefit of the mobile app is it's a push, right? It's more of an interruptive, it has a notification, a toast, you can have it change color. I have a tile on my phone that I have the dashboard, so I've been able to check status here, around the conference. And the thing I hear probably the most is I don't want to be tied to the service health dashboard. I don't want to have to sit there and watch it. So while we're, this is still a journey, but this app now allows you to basically get those more push messages. And then obviously, we don't have a roadmap around that quite yet available, but you can imagine iOS and Android would be the next platforms, and those would be coming very soon as well. So from a customer program perspective, we're constantly looking for, what are the ways that you want to receive this information, and then how can we start to pilot it and get it out to you in a fairly quick way. Okay, so here's some track resources and some additional content. So that's really the end of the content. I do have the mobile app we can take a look at if you're interested. I can pull that up. And then obviously any more questions or comments, feedback, would love to hear that. And my alias is KDO, K-A-T-Y-O, @Microsoft.com. Feel free to email me with any questions or feedback. I'd love to hear it too. Sure, it's KDO, K-A-T-Y-O, @Microsoft.com. We'll go ahead and show you this slide. And we have that. And then, of course, this. So thank you very much for coming, and hopefully that was helpful for your service communications experience.